Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Vajjanarandana Jaya Munatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Vajjanarandana Yashodanandana Vajjanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Guru Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Jam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivachacharya Stokta Sadashi Shri Prabhupada Bhajanaravin Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivachacharya Stokta Sadashi Shri Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai Anant Koti Vaishnavanta ki jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai Prem se Kaush Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sati Gaura Bhaktavinda ki jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai Shri Vrajabhumi Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai Shri Purushottam Kshetra Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai Shri Dwarika Puri Dham ki jai Ganga Mai ki jai Yamuna Mai ki jai Bhakti Devi ki jai Tulsi Maharani ki jai Samaved Bhakta Vrinda ki jai Harinam Sankirtan Yajna ki jai Granth-raj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai Purushottam Mahadev ki jai Shri Shri Gaura Nitai ki jai Shri Shri Krishna Balram ji ki jai Shri Radha Shyam Sundar Shri Lalita Shri Vishakha ki jai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Glories to the assembled devotees. Glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. Glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Shri Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati. So we are speaking from Mataji. You want to show the screen of the verse? So we are speaking from Bhagavad Gita chapter 15. The Yoga of the Supreme Person, the text number 20, the final text 20. And today is a final day of actually Purushottam month. Guhya-tamaṁ śāstram idam uktaṁ mayānagha etad buddhimān syāt bhārata iti guhya-tamaṁ śāstram idam uktaṁ mayānagha buddhimān syāt kṛta-kṛtyaś bhārata iti guhya-tamaṁ śāstram idam uktaṁ mayānagha etad buddhvā buddhimān syāt kṛta-kṛtyaś bhārata. Synonyms. Iti, thus. Guhya-tamaṁ, the most confidential. Śāstram, revealed. Revealed scripture. Idam, this. Uktaṁ, disclosed. Maya, by me. Anagha. Anagha, O sinless one. Etad, this. Buddhvā, understanding. Buddhimān, intelligent. Syāt, one becomes. Kṛta-kṛtyaś, the most perfect in his endeavors. Cha, and bhārata, son of Bharata. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Asitaradhya Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know the perfection. Purport. The Lord clearly explains here that this is the substance of all revealed scriptures, and one should understand this as it is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus one will become intelligent and perfect in transcendental knowledge. In other words, by understanding this philosophy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engaging in his transcendental service, everyone can become freed from all contamination of the modes of material nature. Devotional service is a process of spiritual understanding. Wherever devotional service exists, the material contamination cannot coexist. Devotional service to the Lord and the Lord himself are one and the same because they are spiritual. Devotional service takes place within the internal energy of the Supreme Lord. The Lord is said to be the sun, and ignorance is called the darkness. Where the sun is present, there is no question of darkness. Therefore, whenever devotional service is present, under the proper guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, there is no question of ignorance. Everyone must take to this consciousness of Krishna and engage in devotional service to become intelligent and purified. Unless one comes to this position of understanding Krishna and engages in devotional service, however intelligent he may be in the estimation of some common man, is not perfectly intelligent. The word anagha, by which Arjuna is addressed, is significant. Anagha, O sinless one, means that unless one is free from all sinful reactions, it is very difficult to understand Krishna. One has to become free from all contamination and all sinful activities, then he can understand. But devotional service is so pure and potent that once one is engaged in devotional service, he automatically comes to the stage of sinlessness. While one is performing devotional service in the association of pure devotees in full Krishna consciousness, there are certain things which require to be vanquished altogether. The most important thing one has to surmount is weakness of the heart. The first fall down is caused by the desire to lord it over the material nature. Thus one gives up the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord, and the second weakness of the heart is that as one increases the propensity to lord it over material nature, he becomes attached to matter and the possession of the matter. The problems of material existence are due to these weaknesses of the heart. So, in this chapter, the first 5 verses describe the process of freeing oneself from these weaknesses of the heart, and the rest of the chapter, from the 6th verse through the end, discusses Purushottam Yoga. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 15th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Purushottam Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Person. Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shivtapadakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Shri Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Putale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhya eva cha. Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo mahamadanyaya Krishna prema padayate. Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya namine gaurati se namah. Panchatattva atmakam Krishnam bhaktarupa swarupakam. Bhakta utaram bhaktakhyam namami bhakta shaktinam. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Shri Gopesha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Shri Vishubhanuvi Sute Devi Pranamami Shri Hari Priya Shri Govinda Anandini Shri Govinda Mohini Shri Govinda Sarvasva Sarvakanta Shri Romani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare. So today is the last day of Purushottam month, the very auspicious month that comes after every 32 months approximately. And this time the Purushottam month has just come before the Kartika month. So the accelerated devotional service that the devotees have been doing, can easily be carried forward into the month of Kartika. And it is appearing in the midst of Chaturmasya, the month of the 4 months of austerities that the devotees normally observe and follow. And they take the varieties of vows to advance in their devotional service at the lotus feet of Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is, I think, the smallest chapter in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. It's only 20 verses. And I thought that the 20th verse, right, where the Purushottam Yoga culminates, we will do a small revision of the whole chapter, very brief, and then speak about the 20th verse as well. So it's amazing, the analogy of an inverted banyan tree. I'll tell you an incident. One day I was in Gujarat, and along with my sister, I was visiting some ashrama. And there, because I, put on the khadi, kurta and everything, the kanti, mala and tilak. So somebody obviously interested in inquiring about spiritual subject matter, he came to me and asked me very interesting question. The question, he asked, he says, why in the spiritual world we say Radha Krishna, Lakshmi Narayan, then Rukmani Krishna, Rukmani Dwarkadish, like that. And here in the material world, we say Shiva Parvati, then Kashyap Aditi, then Kardama Devahuti. Why is it that? So there the name of Radha, Lakshmi, Rukmani is taken first, but here the name of Shiva, Kashyap, and Kardama, and like that basically is taken place. So I was completely baffled, I was dumbfounded by this question. So at that point of time, I don't know from where this first sloka of 15th chapter struck my mind. Urdhva mulam atar shakham, and I actually cite this sloka. Urdhva mulam atar shakham ashvattham prahurabhyaya. Chandamsi yasya parnani yastam vedasa vedavet. There is a famous inverted banyan tree where the root is lying, at the top. As compared to a normal tree, the root is always at the bottom, but here the root is at the top and the branches are heading down. So this material world being a reflection of a spiritual reality, here everything gets reversed. So even Radha, Krishna, Lakshmi, Narayan and Rukmani, Dwarkadish, here, so there, the Mataji's name appears first, or the goddesses appear first, but here, Shiva Parvati, the order gets reversed. And this person was so much impressed by the answer. To tell you the truth, this is not a right answer, but I gave. And I can You know, every time I go to the 15th chapter, I invariably recall that actually incident and I have a small laugh about it. But that's how strange basically Krishna gives you, the right realization probably at the right time. I didn't know how to answer and I answered it that way. So anyway, it was very interesting. So Krishna begins this chapter, by giving such a wonderful analogy. And this chapter, strategic location in Bhagavad Gita needs to be understood. The first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, as everybody knows, it deals with various processes of God realization, like karma. There is a part of a dhyana yoga, and there is a dharma. There is a concept of a transcendental knowledge. Dharma and transcendental knowledge combined together to produce the karma yoga or the buddhi yoga. As Prabhupada intermittently basically translates that, both as devotional service. Then there is a description about the jnana yoga and sankhya yoga a little bit, and then dhyana yoga. So these are the subsidiary processes of God realization, which is culminating ultimately into the bhakti yoga, the subject matter of the middle 6 chapters. And finally, in the last 6 chapters, we discuss the vijnana. Some say it is jnana yoga, but it is actually vijnana. It's a realized knowledge. So many things which is discussed in the first 6 chapters is discussed in the last 6 chapters, but on a vijnana level, on a realized level. So here we come, the 15th chapter, which is exactly in the middle of the last 6 chapters, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And it is interesting. It is the chapter which is the culmination of a jnana yoga. That actually we'll see how it is. So let's look at the first 4 verses. The first four verses are actually the sambandha jnana of a material nature of the prakriti through a beautiful analogy of a banyan tree. And Krishna gives this analogy, so it is very easier way to understand the concept he's trying to drive. He's saying in the second sloka that adasya urdvam prasutas tasya sakha. So in the first sloka, he said that the shakha, that is branches, are going down, but he says it is not that the branches are also going up. Guna pravruddha vishaya pravala. On this tree, there are small, nice, tender twigs, which are like a sense objects. And they're nourished by 3 modes of material nature. If you see the entire philosophy, entire material life is about senses enjoying the sense objects. And that is happening under the spell of 3 modes of material nature. So, guna pravruddha vishaya pravala. Adasya mulani anusantatani. In the first look, he says urdhva mulam, but now he says no, adasya mulani. Means the mula is not only, the mula are also going down. So in the first verse, Krishna says that the root is up, right? The branches are down. Now in this look, he's saying the branches are up and the roots are coming down. Adasya mulani anusantatani, these are the extended roots. Karmanu bandini manushya loke. So Prabhupada identifies that these extended roots are like the attachments and the aversions, ichha and dvesha. And this subsidiary roots, so this subsidiary roots of attachment and aversion, they are the cause of enjoyment and the suffering. And because of the ichha and dvesha, sometimes the living entity, is enjoying in the higher planetary systems and is suffering in the lower planetary systems, and sometimes it remains on the actually material earth. So that's very interesting. So now we understand, when you combine these 2 slokas, we can understand that this material world is really a very complicated affair, isn't it? Adasya urdhvam prasutas tasya sakha. Guna pravruddha vishaya pravala. Adasya mulani anusantatani. Karmanu bandini manushya loke. There is a sloka in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.14 which actually describes apanna samshrutim goram. What is apanna samshrutim goram? Apanna samshrutim goram. Apanna means it is apanna means it is a mesh. It's a very complicated mesh. Samshrutim is a cycle of birth and death, and goram means it is complicated. So that actually verse corresponds with these two verses, and there it is described that material world is nothing but a complicated mesh of repeated birth and death. And that sort of realization Krishna is trying to provoke within us in the first two verses, that it is such a complicated mesh. The banyan tree is a very typical tree. You will never find, the monkey who normally hop from one tree to another. You will never find monkey actually hopping onto a banyan tree. You won't find monkeys sitting on a banyan tree. It is so complicated. If they get trapped, it may become very difficult for them to come out. The birds, all right, but the big animals normally would not dare to go on the banyan tree. And in the the third and the fourth sloka, the Krishna is completing Sambandha Jnana of a material tree, and he is giving the conclusion about the form of this material world, which is confirmed by Sukadeva Goswami in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Look at what Krishna is saying. Narvam asya iha tatha upalabhyate. Na anto na cha adir na cha sampratishta. Don't try to get to the bottom of this material world. It is going to be a futile effort, because nobody has ever been able to actually see where the foundation is, where it starts and where it ends. Same like a banyan tree. He has given a perfect analogy of a banyan tree. I mean, the banyan tree, it is impossible to find out where is the root, because all the branches go into the ground and they become the root and come out in the form of a stem, expand into the branches, and then they again basically go down. So where is the tree begun and where it is going to end, just nobody knows. So this is the advice he is giving to the Veda. Chandamsi yasya parnani the analogy of a banyan tree. And there the beautiful example of Chandamsi yasya parnani says that the leaves of a tree are compared with the Vedic hymns. Why is it like that? It is because, the leaves do, just because of the leaves, the tree is able to give the shade. I mean, if there is a scorching heat, and if you stand under any tree which just has the branches but no leaves, you're not going to get any relief, from the scorching heat. So the Vedic hymns, this is the only shelter you have in the material world, is to take the shelter of the scriptures, and through the scriptures you can find your way out. So Krishna is basically saying that ashwattham enam saviruddha moolam. This tree has so deep-rooted roots that the only thing you can do, instead of finding out where is the beginning, where is the foundation, where is the end, you try to you detach yourself from this tree. How? Asanga sastrena dradena chitva, with great determination. Use the axe of detachment and cut yourself from the tree. And then he tells the Vedantist his advice, what he should do. Tata padam yatta parimargitavyam. Now you look into the scriptures and find out that place. Yasmin gatana nivardanti bhuya. So your endeavor should not be actually, don't waste your time in finding out or analyzing this material world. Nobody has been able to do this. You are better off going through the scriptures and finding out which is that place where I go, I do not come back, and I do not want to be trapped over here. In this apanna samshrutim goram, complicated mesh of repeated birth and death. So, and if you do that effort, he says in the next verse, right? Yasmin gatana nivartanti bhuya. If you do that effort and find out through the Vedas, you will find out tameva chadyam purusham prapadye. You will find out that place, and you will find out that personality unto whom you can surrender. He is the supreme person, Adi Purush, he is Purushottam. Tata Tata Pravrutti Prasuta Purani, from whom everything emanates, and who is the source of everything, who is the cause of all causes. So this is the Sambandha Gyan of actually this material world, given beautifully through the analogy of the banyan tree, and with an instruction to find out a place, to, having gone to which you never return. And if you do that through the Vedic scriptures, then you will invariably actually land upon a place which is presided over by the Adi Purusha Purushottam. He will identify who that Purushottam is, and you take his shelter because he is the cause of all causes and there is no one higher than him. Right. So then we come to then that verse, Asanga Sastrena Dradena Chitra, that expands into the verse number 5, which says, Nirmana Moha Jitasanga Dosha Adhyatma Nitya Vinivutta Kama Vanver Vimukta Sukadukha Sanne Gachanti Amuda Padamavyayam Tata. Nirmana Moha Jitasanga Dosha, with all humility, with all basically humility, except basically the faults of this existence. Give up them and accept the shelter of the pure devotees of the Lord. This is a purport of Nirmana Moha Jitasanga Dosha. And what do you do in association with them? Adhyatma Nitya. And as a result of that, Vinivutta Kama, right? All the impurities as a result of Rajas and Tamas will be wiped out. So this portion, this verse, which is actually the process described, as Prabhupada is putting down into the purport, that this is a process described to get out of the material world. And this corresponds to the 5 beautiful verses in the 2nd chapter of 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which actually Prabhupada personally recommends that all devotees involved in preaching must basically memorize those verses. What are those verses? Shrumatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanam. Vidunoti, sorry, Radha Ridiyantastho hi abhadrani vidunoti suratsatam. This is a verse that glorifies associating with the devotees and hearing the, the Krishna Katha, which in itself, like a Punya Shravana. So Punya Kirtanam, Punya Shravana Kirtanam. And as a result of that, the benefactor of the Paramatma living within the heart will wipe out all the impurities. This is Nirmana Moha Jitasanga Dosha. Associate with basically Punya devotees and be Shunvatam. Shunvatam means one who has developed the urge to hear the messages of personality of God. Shunvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanam. Ridiyantastho hi abhadrani. Abhadrani means everything which is painful, everything that is material, painful to the living entities, eternal happiness. Vidunoti suhuratsatam. Vidunoti is destroyed by Paramatma within the heart. As soon as you become a Shruvatam, means you give attentive and submissive hearing to the messages of personality of God. Adhyatma Nitya expands as Nasta Prayashva Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uktaṁ Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. This is Adhyatma Nitya. That by rendering, by hearing the Bhagavatam classes on a daily basis, and by rendering service to the pure Vaishnavas who are actually Srimad Bhagavatam personified, what happens is that the irrevocable, the devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is established as an irrevocable fact, within the heart. That is a translation. And all that is troublesome to the heart is at once destroyed. Nasta Prayashva Abhadreshu. Nasta Prayashva means immediately. Abhadreshu. Bhadra means auspicious. Abhadra means inauspicious. Nityam Bhagavata Sevya. So by regularly reciting of Srimad Bhagavatam, this is Adhyatma Nitya. See, the Adhyatma and Nitya, these 2 words are used. Vinivutta Kama. So the next verse of Bhagavatam. What is the next verse? Tada Rajas Tamo Bhava Kama Lobha Deshri. Cheta etai anavidvam sthitam sattve prasidhati. So, by this process of hearing Bhagavatam daily, right, all impurities arising from Rajas and Tamas, Kama, Lobha, etc., is completely wiped out. And a devotee is established in the mode of goodness. And then, so that is Adhyatma Nitya, Vinivritta Kama. Kama is gone. So then, here, Krishna is talking, Dvalvair Vimukta Sukha-dukha Sanne. The duality, one translates the duality. And this is actually the stage of liberation, whereby this is Dvalvair Vimukta means na sochati, na kankshati. So that is the next verse, very next verse in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.16, 17, 18, 19, I think 20 it is, 19 or 20. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavata bhakti prayojita, bhagavata bhakti yogataha, bhagavata tattva vijnanam mukta sankasya jayate. He is liberated. He is happy. And he is now, getting the transcendental knowledge within his heart. His anathas are being wiped out. Dvanvair vimukta. He's becoming Dvanvair vimukta. And gachanti amuda pada avyayam tata. So that is the next verse, which is Vidyante Radaya Granthis, Chidyante Sarva Sanshaya, Kshiyante Chasya Karmani, Drashta Evatmanishvare. The knot in the heart is pierced, the doubts are destroyed, and the cycle of birth and death is ended. And he proceeds to the higher destination. So it's interesting, the Krishna is just compacting these 5 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam in just basically a few words in this sloka, Nirmana Moha Jita Sankadosha. And then you come to the sloka number 6, that if you do this process, then he gives basically, you can say superficial understanding, but the basic understanding, superficial understanding of the spiritual world. And he says the word that Prabhupada says should captivate all of us. These are words of Prabhupada in the purport. So what is it first? Na tad bhasayate suryo, na shashanko, na pavaka, yad gatva na nivartante, tad dhamma paramam mama. That abode of mine is neither illumined by sun or the moon or the electricity. Interesting why Krishna uses these words. And having gone there, one does not have to come back in this material world. So he gives the hope. If you follow this process, you do not have to come back to this complicated banyan tree of material world, or inverted banyan tree of this material world. So why inverted? It is a reflection of spiritual reality. Have you seen the inverted tree? Yes. On the bank of an ocean or on the bank of the reservoir of the water, where a real tree gets reflected as inverted tree onto the water. And Prabhupada writes beautifully in the purport that it is the reflection on a conditioned soul's desire, or on a soul's desire. Because the soul develops perverted desire. What is a perverted desire? The desire opposite to service. In spiritual world, the real desire is to serve Krishna. Perverted desire is to enjoy independently of Krishna. So then you come to the world, the perverted or the reflected world, or the world of, which reflects a reality in a perverted form. So, and Krishna says, if you come to the spiritual world, you do not have to come back. Prabhupada writes in the purport that, na tada basayate suryo na shashanko na pavaka, no sun, no moon, no electricity means, normally in the material world, people have a concept that any planet is illuminated during the daytime by the sun and during the night time by the moon. And when there are 14 days when moon is not present, people use the fire, right, to have some light at the night time. So illumination, or one is able to see, in the material world by the agency of, these 3 things, that is sun, moon, and electricity. And Krishna very surprisingly says that my planet, does not need any of this thing, because they are self-luminous planet, self-luminous. No sun, no electricity, and no moon is required. Interesting. And then we come to the 7th verse, and Krishna is telling that if you do not follow the process, nirmana moha jitasanga dosha, shrunvatam swakatha Krishna, blah, blah, blah. And if you don't go back to the spiritual world, you will be stuck into the banyan tree. You will be stuck into this material world. And look at what is going to happen to you. So you've got 2 options. Either you get stuck over here, and suffer, or you come over there and yasmin gata na nivartanti bhuya. So the seventh verse is again a very important verse, and Krishna says, Mamai vansho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. This is a constitutional position of a living entity. And the constitutional position of a living entity is that he's a part and parcel of Krishna. And in the material world, right, which is called a jiva loka, because it is a world in which the living entities are jiva bhuta. So there is a material world which is a jiva loka, and the eternal soul becomes acquires a material body, so he becomes a jiva bhuta. So what is the condition of a jiva? Mamai vansho, my part, which is completely spiritual. Mamai vansho jiva loke. What is his condition? Jiva bhuta sanatana, right? Jiva bhuta sanatana. So spirit soul is eternally fragmented part of mind. He becomes a jiva bhuta, he acquires a body, right? And this body is consisting of 6 senses, including the mind. Manasasthani indriyani. This is a jiva bhuta, expansion. Manasasthani indriyani prakrutisthani karshati. So in material world, my living entity, right, which is eternal fragmented part, when it comes to this jiva loka, or comes under the influence of the prakriti, what happens? He becomes a jiva bhuta, means he has body which is consisting of 6 senses, including the mind, and karshati. Karshati means intense suffering. Uses the word karshati. Karshati means when something is very painful, it is called karshati. What is that? Bichu. What's an English of bichu? If the bichu basically bites you, scorpion, yes. If the scorpion bites you, you have intense pain. But if a snake bites you, there is no pain. Within few minutes, you will go back to Godhead. If it is Russell Viper or Cobra or whatever. But if a bichu or a scorpion bites, there will be an intense pain. It will be like karshati, right? Karshati. For example, you are riding on a bike and you fall down. There is an accident, and you fall down with a force, and the bike is falling on you, and you have a pain as a result of a bone being broken. It is karshati. It's an intense pain. As soon as you put the foot down, it's going to pain you like anything. So Krishna is using this word karshati. Manasasthani indriyani prakrutisthani karshati. He comes under the influence of modes of material nature and suffers. And this verse, karshati, expands into the next 2 verses. Krishna says that, now understand the process of karshati. So he is motivating a conditioned soul, right? He's giving a true picture of what is happening to him. And now this is karshati word is expanding. Shariram yat avapnoti yat chapi utkramatishvara. Shariram yat avapnoti. Just as you acquire a body, yat chapi utkramatishvara. Ishvara is translated as a living entity. So living entity acquires the body, and it gives up the body. Guhya-tamaṁ samyati vayurgandhani syāt. So Krishna says that just as the air is carrying the aroma, right? And just as the air, moves from one place to another carrying the aroma, so the aroma goes along with the air is carrying the aroma. In the same way, the mind carries all the conceptions of the karma performed in the previous life along with it into the next life. The living entity, guhya-tamaṁ samyati vayurgandhan iva syāt. What a beautiful analogy used. So shariram yat avapnoti, just as your spiritual acquires the body, yat chapi utkramatishvara, it also gives up the body. And what happens at the time when it gives up the body? It acquires another body. It acquires another body, transmigration of the soul from one body to another, as per dehi nosmin yatha dehe. And then what happens is that guhya-tamaṁ, it acquires, guhya-tamaṁ samyati, it acquires all conceptions through the agency of a mind. So the mind carries all the conceptions, just as the air carries the aroma into the next life. So now, what happens? How is the next body formed? The next body is formed around the next body is formed and 5 senses are given centered around the mind. So manasasthani indriyani, Krishna used the word 6 senses. So now the 6 senses are given. Shotram, chakshu, sparshanam cha, rasanam, granam, evacha, adhisthaya manaschaya, vishayana upasevate. Shotram, chakshu, sparshanam cha, rasanam, jivva, granam, evacha, adhisthaya manaschaya, vishayan upasevate. So according to the conceptions of enjoyment that a living entity carries, it is given a particular sense of senses, right, which are centered around these conceptions, which means the mind, and so that it can enjoy the sense objects according to, according to the propensities it has acquired in the previous life, which is carried over in the next life by way of the mental conceptions. And so he has to enjoy and suffer. So new body is given. It is centered around the mind. So you can understand, mind is, how important it is to control the mind. It's a complex subject matter of, the discussion in its own way. So because of these 2 verses and because of how the living entity suffers, how it acquires the body, Purushottam Yoga is also spoken almost when actually anybody dies. Normally, we speak on the 2nd chapter and 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And in India, we see that in many families, there is a tradition of reciting Purushottam Yoga. All the family members will recite the Purushottam Yoga together on all 5 days after the death. Recently, because of the corona and because of other deaths, so many incidents took place, and I was giving classes and doing satsang with various groups of the friends, families, and there I was asked to speak about the Purushottam Yoga. Because everyone would like to hear the Purushottam Yoga, especially after the death, because of these types of verses, of how the living entity acquires the body and how the new body is formed. Very interesting for people to know. So then basically Krishna says, Utkramantam sitam vapi bunjate va gunanvitam. Vimuda na anupashyanti pashyanti jnana chakshusha. But everybody cannot understand this. That how the living entity gives up the body and acquires another body, and in between acquisition of the body and giving up of the body, what are the 6 transformations of the body and how the living entity enjoys and suffers. Bunjate va gunanvitam. Under the modes of material nature, everybody cannot understand. One who has taken the shelter of a Veda, and one who's Gyan Chakshu, one who has developed this, the vision of a Jnana, he can say, Vimuda na anupashyanti. They will not be able to say. So then, in the very same verse, the similar message that Yatanto yogi naschainam, pashyanti atmani avasthitam. Yatanto yogi naschainam. So the yogi, the jnani, the devotee, the one who is a transcendentalist, one who is on the spiritual path, pashyanti atmani avasthitam, one who is situated in the knowledge of the self, will be able to see, because he sees that the body is separate from the soul, and he can understand that how the soul transmigrates from one body to another body. He will be able to see this. Yatantopi kṛta-kṛtyaś, one who is involved in the sense gratification. Kṛta-kṛtyaś means one who has nothing to do with the activities of the soul. That is kṛta-kṛtyaś. Yatantopi kṛta-kṛtyaś, one who has not perfected the process, right? One who is still involved, one is still to do with the sense gratification. Naiva pashyanti acetasa. His consciousness is not fully developed. He will not be able to see. So now Krishna speaks. Krishna wants to attract this type of living entities who are not able to see this fact, and that is where here the crux of the Purushottam Yoga, will actually take place. Crux of the Purushottam Yoga will take place. So, yatantopi kṛta-kṛtyaś naivam pashyanti acetasa. So, Krishna wants to attract the attention of these conditioned souls who are not on the path of self-realization. How should he do that? So they understand only, the language of the sense gratification. They have not perfected, the process. They are not on this path. So Krishna understanding that neophytic nature, he actually tells them some basic verses by telling that it is me who is maintaining your existence. So in the next 3 verses, he actually says that how Krishna is maintaining our body. And the body of all the living entities, not only the humans, but all the living entities. So Gama Vishyacha Bhutani Dharayami Aham Ojasa. No. Before that, Yadaditya Gatam Tejo Jagat Bhasayate Akhil. Yat Chandramasi Yat Chagnau Tat Tejo Vidhimamakam. Krishna says, Yadaditya Gatam Tejo, that sun, right, which is illuminating the whole of the universe. His teja, his prowess, the fire behind the sun, the light of the sun, the energy of the sun, and yat chandramasi, even the moon, yat chagnau, even the fire. So tat tejo vidhi mamakam, that is coming from me. Tat tejo vidhi mamakam. And interesting, without the sun, nothing can ever grow. So Krishna is saying, I am the one, through the agency of the sun, growing the fruits, vegetables, grains, and everything for you. Next verse. Gama vishyacha bhutani dharayami ahamojasa. Pushnami chaushati sarva somu bhutva rasatmakaha. Not only I grow the food, but I become soma bhutva, I become the moon, I soma bhutva. Rasatmakaha, I am the giver of the juice to all the vegetables and actually herbs. And making your food very tasty. So not only I grow it, I basically put the juice in it as well. I am that agency. By my energy, the moon is able to infuse. By the moonlight, I actually become a moon and provide the moonlight for which the vegetables, the juice will, grow within the vegetables. And the food will become tasty. And Gama Vishyacha Bhutani. Gama means the planet, Avishya means entering, Bhutani means every living entity. Dharayami, I'm holding them. These big planets, Earth is with so much of the weight, it's just floating around. So Krishna is telling, don't be surprised, because I have entered the Earth and I'm holding it in orbit. I'm holding all the planets in the orbit. And Dharayami Aham Ojasa means under my instruction, all these planets are moving in such a way that they never collide. And there is a perfect existence within the universe. Wow. So that is the second aspect. And the third is Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashrita. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva, that digesting fire within the belly of all the living entities, within the body of all the living entities. I am that fire. And Prana Pana Samayukta Pachami Yandam Chaturvidam. Prana Pana Samayukta. So by the, that fire becomes manifest by synchronized movement of Prana Vayu. Prana Vayu means one, which you inhale, and Apan is one that you take out. And by that basically combination of the air, the fire gets ignited within the belly, and that fire, Krishna says, is made Vaishvanaro. Vaishvanaro is the digesting, is the Jataragni, the fire present within the belly to digest the food. So not only I grow the food through the agency of a sun, not only I put the juices within all the herbs and everything through the agency of a moon, but I digest through the agency of a fire. So I'm maintaining a gross body. So this type of verses are very interesting to the neophytes. They immediately become attracted to this personality, because we will be attracted to someone who maintains us, isn't it? So Krishna is using these right verses over here, and this is his yoga. Now, this is what Purushottam yoga is, what the Purushottam or Krishna is doing for us, right? Bhakti yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga is what we are doing for Krishna. So this Purushottam yoga, Krishna is telling, this is what I'm doing for you. And so this is about maintaining a gross body. Now it comes to maintaining a subtle body. So subtle body is Vedeshu Sarveshu, Vedeshu Sarveshu. No. Sarvasya chaham Radhi Sannivishto. Wow. Sarvasya chaham Radhi Sannivishto. Mata Sprutir Jnanam Apohanam cha. I'm maintaining now the subtle body. How? By becoming a Paramatma and giving you the knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. And Srila Prabhupada basically translates and explains from a variety of angles. At the beginning of the creation, after a long period of animated, suspended life within the body of Mahavishnu, when the living entities, come to the life, come to the animated stage. Animated stage means a state through, when they're given the body, according to their unfinished desire or mental conception in their last previous life. Imagine, this is the beginning of the universe. The Paramatma at that point of time gives the intelligence, impetus how to act. Daily in the morning, when there is an ekadashi and you rise early and you have to do nirjala fasting because it is Purushottam month, Krishna gives you the remembrance straight in the morning. Today is ekadashi and you are not drinking water. It happens. Always it happens, right? And your proof of Paramatma can be given on a day-to-day basis. So, Sarvasya chaham radhi sannivishto mata smrutir jnanam apohanam cha. I am giving you exact knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. You want to enjoy the material world? I give you forgetfulness of spiritual world and spiritual subject matters so that you can enjoy the world. You want to go back to the spiritual world? Then I will give you the remembrance of basically. I will actually manifest the Divya Jnana. I will give you the Divya Jnana. I will give you the remembrance of what the spiritual world is like. The knowledge of what the spiritual world like, so that you can take the process. So we depend upon Krishna for everything. This is the purport of these 4 verses. Sarvasya chaham radhi sannivishto mata smrutir jnanam apohanam. Then comes the interesting verse. Vedeshu sarvesu aham eva vedyo. Vedeshu sarvesu aham eva vedyo. Vedanta krit veda videv aham. So when a neophyte understands that, this is a person who is maintaining my body, this is a yoga of Krishna. The Paramatma is to enter into every animated, inanimate, atom and maintain the whole existence. And when one realizes this by associating with the devotees, nirmana moha jitasanga dosha, then one understands that yes, we should take shelter of Krishna. So Krishna now is going to give you the transcendental knowledge, is now going to enlighten you. And he says, hang on a minute, that enlightenment also comes from me. Vedeshu sarvesu aham eva vedyo. By all Vedas, I am to be known. Now, if you analyze the body of Vedic knowledge, there are 7 sections of it. What are the 7 sections? There is Vasudeve Paraveda. Then Vasudeve Parakriya. Vasudeve Parayoga. Vasudeve Para. So there is a Kriya, there is a Yoga, there is a Tapa, there is a Dharma, there is a Gati, and then there is a Jnanam. And there is a Makha, that is the sacrifice. So these are 7, correct? So Vasudeve Paraveda, Vasudeve Paramakha, supreme goal of all the sacrifices. Vasudeve Para Yoga, supreme goal of all the yogic processes, which includes mainly, realizing the self and the supreme Paramatma through the control of the breath. That yoga is referred here. Vasudeve Parakriya means by all fruitive activities, one has to please Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then Vasudeva Param Jnanam. By all Jnanam, the Vasudeva is to be understood. Vasudeva Param Tapa. By all austerity, Vasudeva should be pleased. Vasudeva Paro Dharmo. What is a Paro Dharmo? What is a Paro Dharmo? Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adokshaje ahaitukiya pratihata yayatma suprasidati. Sa means that. Why? Certainly. Savai pumsam paro dharmo. The supreme occupation of a living entity is that by which he renders transcendental service or the loving service unto the transcendental Lord. So that is Vasudeva Paro Dharmo. And then finally Vasudeva Param Gati. So by all 7 sections of Veda, right, Vasudeva is to be approached. So Krishna is telling, Vedesu Sarvesu Ahameva Vedya. He's not telling anything wrong. This verse appears in 1.2.28 and 29 in Srimad Bhagavatam. Very interesting verse. Second chapter is definitely very interesting. The whole chapter one must memorize. And then he says, Vedanta Krut Veda Videvcha Aham. I am the compiler of Vedanta. So Prabhupada writes, Vyasdev Satyavesh Avtar. Right? Who can translate the Vedas? Who can translate, such a big body of literature? Vedas is empowered. He's a living entity empowered by Krishna to write the Vedas and finally give the commentary on the Vedas in the form of Vedanta Sutra. So Vedanta Krut Veda Videvcha Aham. And this Vedanta, Krishna is mentioning here because it is a subject matter for the Gyanis to study. What is the sadhana of Gyanis? The Gyanis study the Vedanta, they recite Omkara, and they practice celibacy. And just by doing this, they want to attain Brahman realization. So now Krishna expands, the entire Vedanta Sutra in just 3 slokas. So he then says, Dvavimam Purusho Loke, Ksharashchakshara Evacha, Kshara Sarvani Bhutani, Kutasto Akshara Uchyate. So the living entity is the tatastha energy, is the marginal potency. It either stays in the material world and acquires the body after body after body, the transmigration of a soul from one body to another. It's called the fallible state. So Kshara Sarvani Bhutani. Bhutani means the soul that acquires the body is called a Bhuta. And it's called fallible. Kshara Sarvani Bhutani. Kutasto means the one which is situated in the internal potency or in the spiritual world. Akshara Uchyate, he's infallible. So this is a sloka about living entity. And this knowledge is called the guhya. Guhya means confidential. Then he says, so this is a living entity. In a conditioned state, it is considered fallen, fallible. In the liberated state, it is called infallible or akshara. Akshara, akshara. So then higher than this is Paramatma, uttamastu purushastu anya. Uttamastu purushastu anya, Paramatma iti udayata. What does it do? Yo loko trayamavishya, Bibharti Avyaya Ishvara. Bibharti means maintain. So we have seen how Paramatma maintains, the gross and basically the subtle body. Sarvasya chaham, radhisamni vishtu, matos prutir jnanam aponamcha. All these verses, and Gama Vishyacha Bhutani, and Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutvā, and Tat Tejo Vidhipamakam. This is Paramatma. So he is, so the Jiva can never become a Paramatma. And so Paramatma is definitely Uttama Purusha, the expansion of Purushottama. And Uttama Purusha is identified as this Paramatma. And so this is a guhya-tara. What is guhya-tara? Is more confidential. Guhya-tara, and now guhya-tamaṁ. He's going to reveal the guhya-tamaṁ in the next 2 verses. So what is a guhya-tamaṁ knowledge? Tasmat sharo atito aham. Tasmat, therefore, he says, therefore, tasmat ksharo atito aham. Atito means superior to kshara. Aksharadacha uttama. Among the aksharas, I am uttama. You already established, no? Uttamas purushas tuanya. Means beyond kshara and akshara, there is a uttam purusha. So he's now, saying the same thing. That tasmat kshara atito aham. Aksharadacha uttama. Atosmi, therefore, atosmi loke vedesu prathito purushattamam. I'm not only saying that. Everyone, all knowledgeable people in all the loka, right? And Veda means in Veda, the Vedanta. So because this is a Vedanta Sutra verse, this is coming from Vedanta Sutra. So what is that? Yeah, loke vedeshu prathito purushattamam. I'm celebrated as that supreme person. Atosmi loke vedecha prathito means celebrated as a purushottamam. Not only I'm saying that, everyone, the Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, it is confirmed by actually everybody. And now the verse in which the whole knowledge culminates into what? So, what is that verse? Tito Purushottama. Yo mamevam sanmudo janati purushottamam. Yes sarvavid bhajanti mam sarva bhavena bhārata. Yo mameva sammudo, yo mamevam asammudo. Now he is completely undivided. He knows the status of a living entity, the Paramatma, and the guhya-tamaṁ, that is me, the Purushottam, who is the source of both the soul and, the super soul. So, um, so now he is completely undivided. So he has got a complete knowledge. Sarvavit, he has become a complete knowledgeable person. Bhajanti mam, he is worshipping me. Sarva bhavena bhavita, with all the hearts. So this is the most confidential knowledge. But having come to this understanding of who the Purushottam is, one should surrender into him, worship him with all the hearts. So this section, also, highlights the theme which is going through the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita is knowledge, surrender, devotion, and then finally in the 20th verse, that is the reciprocation. So the knowledge, according to Vedanta Sutra, summarized in verse number 17 and 18th. In the 19th, we see, the surrender and the devotion. Sa sarva vid bhajanti mam sarva bhavena bhavata. So that is surrender and the devotion. And now in the 20th verse, Krishna is telling the reciprocation, which is iti guhya-tamaṁ śāstram evam uktaṁ mayānagha. Oh sinless one, now I've told you the most confidential part of the literature. Etad buddhvā buddhimān syāt. Now you have become intelligent. Kṛta-kṛtyaś bhārata. This is the reciprocation, that all your endeavors will now know the perfection. And endeavors knowing the perfection means what? What is the endeavor of a jnani, or what is the endeavor of someone who is surrendered to Purushottam? He wants to go back to the spiritual world. And having gone there, he will not come back. So one who surrenders to Purushottam, with all the hearts, Krishna is guaranteeing that your endeavors will know the perfection. Etad buddhvā buddhimān syāt. Kṛta-kṛtyaś bhārata. All your endeavors will know the perfection. So I think this is 632. So we have summarized, the whole chapter, all the 20 verses. I guess basically, because it's a small chapter, we can do that in 1 hour. And I've tried to touch, the main themes in this Purushottam Yoga, which is the first 5 verses, first actually 4 verses, which actually describes frailty of the material existence through the analogy of, the banyan tree. And then Krishna actually describes the process to come out of, this complicated mesh of the, cycle of birth and death, explained, through the analogy of a banyan tree, by asanga sastrena dradena chitva, is expanding like this. And we discussed the 5 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, which corresponds with this. Then there is a ray of hope. This information should captivate us. Prabhupada says, Yasmin gatana nivartanti bhuve, tadadama paramam mama. Having gone there, you never come back. If you don't do that, then you're suffering in the material world. Karshati is the word used. And we are the eternal part and parcel of Krishna in Mamaivanshu Jivloke. And then the Karshati expands into how soul acquires the body and gives up the body and how it enjoys under the modes of material nature. And Krishna says, be self-realized, get jnana, otherwise you will not understand this. So the starting process of a jnana is to understand, right, that Krishna is maintaining us. So the 3 verses beginning with, I am the energy of the sun, I grow everything, I am the energy of the moon that provides juice to all the vegetables, and I am that fire in the belly of all the living entities that digest the 4 types of food. Chaturvidam pachami aham. Then basically I'm maintaining the subtle body, right, by giving you the knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness as a Paramatma seated within the heart. So now the neophyte, wants to take shelter of the Krishna, and so he's now given a transcendental knowledge. The whole Vedanta Sutra is summarized in 3 verses. As the living entity is a tatastha energy, known as a fallible here, infallible over there. And then higher than that is Paramatma, which is maintaining the entire existence. And both Paramatma and the living entity are coming from Purushottama, that is Krishna. And having known that, one should take a shelter and worship him with all the hearts. And if one does that, then all these endeavors will know the perfection. So this is the summary of the Purushottam Yoga. And I really wanted to, I'm thanking Lavangata Mataji to give me this opportunity. Because I wanted to speak during the Purushottam month about the Purushottam month. I've given many classes, but I thought that in Vrindavan, I would love to give a class. So if anybody is having any comment or questions, then please let me know.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was an excellent summary. Vrindavan Ishri is waiting to say something.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam.
Yeah, Prabhuji, I want to know what is meant by infallible entities. Who are infallible entities? I have understood the fallible entities, but I'm not getting infallible entities.
Okay, the living entity who is serving Krishna in the spiritual world. Yasmin gatana nivartanti bhuya. Krishna says you never come back again. Yada gatvana nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. So there the living entity does not have to change the body. The infallible entity means you are in your swarupa, eternal swarupa, serving Krishna eternally. Here you are in your rupa, not in your swarupa. And your rupa is changing according to your karma, under the influence of guna. So the fallible means every time basically you take a birth, your rupa is changing. But there your swarupa is unchanged. That is a difference between fallibility and infallibility. You understand this?
Yeah. So are these the liberated souls who are serving Krishna in Goloka? Are
No,
these,
we can also go to the Goloka. The process is there for all the living entities. That's how Krishna is telling that, he's attracting us through, the verses of how he's maintaining us as actually a Paramatma. Why is he giving this knowledge? Why is he speaking this Bhagavad Gita? Partho vatsa sudhir bhokta dugdam gitamrutam mahat. Krishna is basically, Krishna
milking.
is, milking this cow of 108 Upanishads. Partho vatsa. Partha, Partha has taken the form of a vatsa. Okay, he's not having the Bhagavad is spoken for us. Sudhir Bhokta, it is for our enjoyment, the content soul. So we can also go to Golok Vrindavan. And it is said that once we go to Golok or the Vaikuntha, we don't have to come back. That is Krishna's basically guarantee.
Okay.
So we are actually fallible. He is saying, why we are fallible? Because Mamai Vansho Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. For eternally we have been suffering. Manasasthana. Under the influence of material nature, we have been suffering eternally. So now he's going to put an end to that process. By bringing us back to basically God, and where we go, situated in our swarupa, don't have to come back over here. So we are not, fallible anymore. We'll be infallible there.
Yes. Thank you so much. It is so clear now. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Anybody else? Any comments? Okay, looks like, there are no questions, Mataji.
Looks like no more. Yeah, we're getting, we got.
My actually two sisters have also joined, yes.
Oh, good, very good. We're getting a few here. We're getting between 10 and 20 on Facebook, and our YouTube channel has got up to 100 subscribers. So YouTube is doing better. People watching it at their convenience. I think people have trouble finding.
Okay, so is this class on the YouTube too? I think so.
It's not live. It's live on Facebook, and I'm putting it within 15 minutes. I'll put it on YouTube.
Okay.
I'll send you the link.
All right.
I'll send the link to everybody.
Sure.
Because all these devotees in Australia will have missed your class, so they'll like to hear it.
Okay.
All right.
Oh yeah, because I think it's too late for them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's far too late for them.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nutan. Thank you for attending the class.
Of course, anytime. Hi, thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
it was nice class.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.